So you said that there is no goodness or badness in the object itself. I understand that all characteristics of objects, including goodness, badness, impermanence, foulness, unsatisfactoriness, and emptiness, do not come from the side of the thing, but are dependently designated. Sure. But goodness and badness are really dependently designated. I mean, everything's dependently designated, yeah, but goodness and badness are much more arbitrary, don't you think? Yeah. I mean, we designate impermanence because there's an object that changes moment to moment. You know, this is good, this is bad, really arbitrary and very, very dependent upon individual circumstances. I mean, this towel is going to be impermanent no matter what you do with it, where you put it. Conventionally, it's going to be impermanent. It's never going to be permanent. But a certain behavior, being good or bad, is going to depend on a lot of other circumstances. Don't you think? Yeah. So that one's, and goodness and badness are, whoa, they're really pretty loaded, because we usually think good means it accomplishes the purposes I want, my happiness, and bad means it interferes with my happiness. That's how we usually define good or bad. But one single event can be conducive for one person's happiness and conducive for another person's unhappiness. So is it good? Is it bad? Yeah. And you have to look at the whole situation. Now, sometimes there may be ethical concerns. You know, something is constructive, destructive, according to the motivation or whatever. But then, you know, there's other things. You know, putting putting the cup upside down in the cupboard or putting it right side up in the cupboard. Okay, now for some people, one of those two alternatives is good and the other one is bad. And not just dependently, but inherently. So if you are a right side up person and your roommate puts the cup in upside down, you go on a moral indignation spiel to correct, you know, their deficient, you know, wisdom about how to keep somebody healthy. And it's obviously by keeping the cups right side up, because that way they don't touch the dirt on the shelf. But the person who puts them upside down says, that's the way to prevent disease, because that way, if they're upside down, the dirt doesn't get in them. If they're right side up, all the dirt gets in, the bug flies in. Okay? So good, bad, even in something like that, where is it? Okay? And also because good and bad, just the words, they have so much. They're pretty loaded words, aren't they? Yeah. I've started using constructive and destructive rather than positive and negative karma. I've started saying realistic and not realistic, beneficial and not beneficial, rather than good and bad. Because we're all used to, as kids, were you told that you were bad? Yeah, I think probably most of us, at one time or another as a kid, we were told we were bad. Now, what does that mean? Okay, if you tell a child they're bad, what does that mean? Does it give them any useful information? No. It just lets them know that mom and dad are unhappy. The kid may not have the vaguest idea of why mom and dad are unhappy. But bad means I'm the cause of my parents' unhappiness. So I'm bad, I'm shameful, I'm inferior, I'm add on one negative adjective after another one. Okay? So that word is so loaded, but it actually doesn't give any useful information to it, except somebody is unhappy. And then as a child, you blame yourself for their unhappiness, which is not proper to do, but we do it anyway. You know, sometimes when we're kids, we're told we were good kids. Yeah. I say that to the cat when she walks from my door directly to the house without skipping out into the garden and running all over the place. I say, good, Maitri. Good just means that she did what I wanted her to do. Yeah. Does it have anything to do with her? The kitty? No. Yeah, it's a totally meaningless thing. Yeah. So it's always good if we give somebody feedback, either positive, either constructive, or, otherwise feedback, to say what they did and the effect of what they did on us. Yeah, how we felt or what need it met or whatever, something like that, instead of just saying, oh, it's good. What you did is good. Well, I just did a lot of things. Yeah. Like your kid maybe cleans up their room, but at the same time they're cleaning up their room, they step on, another one of your old family heirlooms and crush it. Yeah. So you say, oh, you're so good. Meaning you cleaned up your room. But the kid also knows that they squashed this thing that was important to you. So this, is that good? Is that bad? And is stepping on the thing itself good or bad? You just stepped on it. That's all. There's no moral intention behind the action. Yeah. One person's going to go, thank goodness you stepped on that ugly thing. We can throw it out now. And the other family member is going to go, oh, but that was my great-grandmother's toothbrush. It's so precious, and you destroyed it. Okay? So, good and bad are really difficult. We tend to think a lot in terms of good and bad, and it would make us a lot happier if we didn't think in terms of good and bad. Yeah. If we just thought in terms of realistic and not realistic, conducive for creating the causes for happiness in the long term, or conducive for liberation and awakening, or non-conducive. Yeah. In NVC, nonviolent communication, he really advocates getting rid of these kind of discriminations of good and bad, and says that even when we, let's say we blow up at somebody, instead of saying, I'm wrong, I'm bad, how could I have done that, I'm so guilty, to say, what was it? I wasn't able to meet my own need to be respectful of other people. That sounds entirely different, doesn't it? Because we do have a need to be respectful to other people. We feel better about ourselves when we're respectful. Yeah. So when we blow up at somebody, then afterwards, it's like, we're kind of disappointed in ourselves because we didn't meet our own need to be respectful. Okay. That sounds a whole lot different than, I'm so bad, I'm so stupid, I'm so mean, forgive me, no, you can't forgive me, I don't blame you, and all this other rubbish we get involved in. Okay? So it's interesting in many of these things how we can just change the perspective and get rid of so much judgment in there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because we're quite judgmental. We aren't just content, when you're sitting at the airport watching people go by, we're not just content like, there's somebody who walks fast, there's somebody who walks slow. It's we put a value judgment on fast and slow. Yeah, that person's walking so slow they don't know other people behind them want to get past. That person's walking so fast they're bumping into everybody. Yeah? It's like we put judgments on just basic things. Yeah, and we get ourselves so tied up in good and bad and right and wrong. Okay? So I'm not saying that ethical conduct is all just relative and do what you want, and as long as nobody finds out, it's okay. I'm not saying that, because very clearly, when we do certain actions, it influences our own mind. Yeah. And it influences how we feel about ourselves right here and now. It influences what we will experience later on. Yeah. So we do need to have an ethical core and an ethical, do you have a, what? Compass. Yeah, thank you. I was going to say barometer, but no, compass. Compass. Well, yeah, it could go up and down. You're saying this way is better than this way? Okay, so we do need that because, we can see certain things lead to happiness and other things lead to suffering. Okay, but also we don't need to get things get so heavy about, well, this leads to suffering, so it's bad, and the person who does it is evil and influenced by the devil, and the person who does this other thing that leads to happiness is good, and they have a little angel, on their shoulder looking over them. Yeah. Again, it's too much drama. If we make a mistake, we harm somebody else, we know that we harm ourselves whenever we harm somebody else. We regret it, we purify it. We put it down. Yeah. Unless you really like collecting all your bad stuff from your past and carrying it around with you all day. Yeah. If you really enjoy that, yeah. Put your psychological backpack on and throw all your guilt in it and all your badness and all your mistakes and carry it around and get hunched over like this and then say to people, poor me. Okay? So we need to think a little bit more about these things. Okay? Make some sense? Yeah. It reminds me of one time I was at one of our monastic gatherings. Every year, the Western monastics from the different Buddhist traditions, we gather together and from a Monday to a Friday, and we talk and learn from each other. And during one of these, one young monk from the Theravada tradition asked to speak to me. And he was telling me how, he just, he's trying so hard to be a good monk, but he makes all these small mistakes. I mean, because some of the precepts have a lot of detail, and he just can't do everything exactly as it is. And how he imagines the Buddha looking at him and saying, "You bad monk, you're not keeping your precepts properly." And he thinks that, that's going to motivate him to shape up. Clearly it wasn't. I mean, the poor guy was in quite a state. Yeah. I said, Buddha isn't standing there pointing a finger at you, telling you you're a lazy, good-for-nothing monk. Buddha looks at all sentient beings with compassion and understanding and acceptance. Yeah. Can you look at yourself that way? Okay. So, all this kind of stuff is example of how we exaggerate something and project something and make a story out of something that doesn't have to be a story. Yes, we keep our precepts as best as we can. We make mistakes. We make amends when we make mistakes. We learn from our mistakes. We continue on. What else is new? You think there's somebody who from the day they took their precepts never transgressed anything? Maybe the Buddha. The rest of us? Yeah. Why do we take precepts? Because we can't keep them perfectly. If we could keep them perfectly, we wouldn't need them. Chapter 20. Okay. Noticing how everything depends on thought. Okay, so here we start with a quotation from the Buddha. Here, even the various mind-pleasing blossoming flowers and attractive shining supreme golden houses have no inherently existent maker at all. They are set up through the power of thought. Through the power of conceptuality, the world is established. I think this is from the King of Concentration Sutra. When you develop a rough idea of what it means to be dependent on thought, you should ask yourself whether persons and things usually appear to you this way or not. Okay, now, what does dependent on thought mean? Okay, so dependent on thought means that things do not become what we think they are until we think they are that and give them a designation that complements what we think they are. Okay? So that block over there, you see the block, doesn't become a, would you call it a doorstop? Yeah? Yeah. If you saw that block in another situation, if it were up here on the altar with a statue on top of it, Would it be a doorstop? No. In fact, when you first made it, you put it up here. You wouldn't even consider it ever being a doorstop. You would consider it a platform for a Buddha image. Okay? Our mind probably wouldn't even put it together like that. If you were a little kid, it might be, something that you build your Lego mansions on top of. Yeah. If you were a kitty, it's something you jump over. Or scratch. If it has it, well, that fabric isn't so good, but you would want it to have the good fabric, and you could scratch it. Okay? So things become what we think they are when we agree that they serve a certain purpose, and we give them a name that we all agree upon indicates that they have those characteristics and serve that purpose. Okay? So before something is given a name, we can call it anything we want. The sound of the word doesn't matter. Yeah? So before this was given the name package of tissues, we could call it ukigaga. Okay? And it would be fine. Yeah, then everybody would say, did you put the ukigaga on the thing? And that would be fine. But once we label it package of tissues, and we all understand that tissues are something you blow your nose on, or you mop up spilled water with, or you do any other kind of who knows what with it, then you can no longer call it an ukigaga? I forgot what we called it. You couldn't call it an ukigaga anymore because nobody would understand what you were talking about. You would have to call it a package of tissues. Okay. But that doesn't mean it is inherently a package of tissues with package of tissues radiating out from it. Okay. Package of tissues is a designation that we call this. So we don't have to say, that thing made of plastic with the white stuff inside, which isn't, that takes a long time to say, and people could mistake it for something else, like a thing of laundry detergent, which is a package with white stuff inside. Okay? So we develop names, and names are shorthands for things, but they are not what the object is. Part of the thing is we give something a name, and then we forgot that we gave it a name, and we think it is that thing from its own side. Okay? So I look here at this body and mind, and I call it me or I. Yeah? And I cling dearly to that me or I because that's the most important thing in the world. Okay? When you look at this body and mind, you don't call it me or I. You call it somebody else. You, he, she, it, something that gets in my way. Yeah, you can call somebody else any other thing. But when you give it another name, you could call it friend. Some people look here and say friend. Some people see this body mind say enemy. Okay? So what something becomes, depends on the whole situation around it and on us agreeing to call something somebody. Okay? So you look at this body and mind and you don't call it I. You look at your own body and mind and call it I. I look at it and say you. Okay. And we all know that I is more important and you is less important. Okay. But we're so shocked that other people don't recognize that I am I and I should be the most important one. Okay? So again, we give things labels or names, and then we forget that we gave them the names and think that they are that thing. Okay? Take the Crimea. The Crimea was once under the control of, was it the Ottoman Empire? Anybody remember? Ottoman Empire? No, but before that, it's been under Russian control, I think, since Catherine the Great. So before her, maybe Austro-Hungarian Empire. I don't know. I majored in history. I can't remember anything. Anybody else know? Anyway, so the Crimea, at one point, was Russia. Then it was Ukraine. It was Soviet Union. Now it's Russia again. Okay. Now, the land is the same, but we call it different names and we fight over different names. Because some people who live there say this is inherently Ukraine. And other people say, no, it is inherently Russia. Which one is it? Depends which side you're on. Okay? But we forget that and we think instead that, this clump of dirt is inherently Russia or inherently Ukraine. Or I'll have to look up who owned it before that. I think it must have been, I don't know. Catherine the Great was what, 18th century? I don't know. We'll look it up. Okay, so the problem is sometimes, this thing of we forget that we gave it the name and we think that the name comes from that side of the object itself. Especially in the names like your or mine. Yeah. So that creates problems. But normally, just giving something a name, conceiving things and giving them a name, normally that's neither good nor bad. It's just a convenient way for sentient beings to communicate. Yeah, that's all. When we are affected by emotions on a subtle level, it is difficult to identify how we hold on to them. Therefore, consider a time when you felt intense hatred or desire. The hated or desired person or thing seemed extremely substantial, even totally unchanging, didn't it? Okay. So just think, the day, November, 10th? How did you feel? Yeah. I think people reified many things on that day, the day after the election. No matter who you voted for, everything went and got solidified. Okay? So whoever it was, extremely good, extremely bad. When you look closely, you will understand that there is no way to claim that you already see phenomena as dependent on thought. You will find that they seem to exist in their own right. In other words, when we look at something, we don't think this towel exists dependent on thought. We think there's something here that's a towel. We don't think the gong exists just by being conceived and labeled. We think there's something here that is a gong. Yeah. Similarly, we look at ourselves, we look at somebody in the room. Yeah. We think that they are whatever their name is. We don't think, oh, they got designated that name by their parents. Sometimes we get very attached to the names. It's interesting. I had somebody I knew during college just contacted me a couple of weeks ago. Her name, both her first name and her last name, completely different than they were when I was in college. Yeah? And it's like, okay, maybe your last name changes, but you have a different first name? Yeah? Are you really that same person? All it was sounds. Yeah. I think she did. I think she did. Yeah. You know how she found me? She said she had tried looking up my old name in Google. Nothing came. She read the book, what was it, The Saffron Road? And she saw my old name in that book. And that's how she got in touch with me. Yeah. So His Holiness says, when I was about 35 years old, I was reflecting on the meaning of a passage by Tsongkhapa about how the I cannot be found either within or separate from the mind-body complex, and how the I depends for its existence on conceptuality. In other words, for something to exist, it has to be conceived and designated. Yeah. When you study, before I read Tsongkhapa's thing, when you study child development, they say that little children do not have spatial identification. So there's colors and shapes, but they cannot pick out discrete objects from those colors and shapes. Yeah. We look over there and there's colors and shapes and we say, oh, Venerable Yeshe is sitting there. For a baby, there's colors and shapes, but they haven't been taught to conceptualize that, to crystallize it, and think, oh, there's a person and that person has that name. Yeah. So a lot of our education is learning how, with the conceptual mind, to put data together and think of it as an object. Yeah. It's very interesting. Because we think, oh, you walk in the room, there's a thermos, there's a clock, there's a gong. For a baby, there's just different colors and not discrete objects. They have to be taught. Yeah? That these kinds of things get put together and then you have a name and it has a certain purpose. Okay, here's Tsongkhapa's passage. A coiled rope's speckled color and coiled form are similar to that of a snake. And when the rope is perceived in a dim area, the thought arises, this is a snake. Okay, so you have a rope that kind of speckled and it's coiled up like this. It's in an area where you can't see too well. And you say, ah, there's a snake. Okay. As for the rope, at the time when it is seen to be a snake, the collection and parts of the rope are not even in the slightest way a snake. Are they? You look in that rope, through every single fiber of the rope, everything about the rope, there is absolutely no snake there, period. Okay? Therefore, that snake is merely set up by conceptuality. Okay, sounds reasonable. Yeah, there's a mistaken perception. We think that a coiled rope is a snake. We give it the wrong label. We have the wrong conception. We give it the wrong name. Not that seems okay. Yeah, because really there's no snake there. Yeah, the rope is not going to bite us. Okay. In the same way, when the thought I arises in dependence upon mind and body, nothing within mind and body, neither the collection, that is a continuum of earlier and later moments, so not the collection of mind and body, that's a continuum over time. Yeah, that is not I. Okay. Nor the collection of the parts at one time, so the mind and body at one time, that also is not I. Nor the separate parts, so the body is not I, the mind is not I. Nor the continuum of any of the separate parts, so not the continuum, a series of moments of body or a series of moments of mind. None of these is in even the slightest way the I. Now, how does that strike you? Yeah, part of us goes, yeah, okay, I'm not the body, I'm not the mind. But what's going on when we say, yeah, I'm not the body, I'm not the mind? We're holding on to something else being I. That's not the body, that's not the mind, but is separate from the body and mind. Something, some self, some soul, some inexpressible something that's not the body, that's not the mind, but it is me. Does such a thing exist? No, such a thing does not exist. Do we feel in our gut that there's some kind of independent me? You bet we do. Okay. So we're kind of like somebody who called the rope a snake, and even when they turn on the light and see that there's no snake there, continues to say, there's a snake and I'm afraid. We're kind of like that. Okay, so none of those things is even in the slightest way the I. Okay, now think about that a little bit more. Yeah, you have this coiled rope. Yeah, You project snake on it. There's absolutely nothing that is a snake there. And anybody who thinks there's a snake there is radically wrong. There's the collection of body and mind. Within that collection, there is nothing that is me. Within this thing, there is no I. Does that rattle you? Yeah? If it rattles us, it means that we're beginning to get it. Okay? There is absolutely nothing within this body or mind, nothing that can be identified as me. You can spread all my body parts out, my mind, all the different thoughts and emotions. You can look at all of them individually. They aren't forms, so you can't spread them out. But within none of those things is there a person. In all of those thoughts, all of those emotions, all of those happy, sad, neutral feelings, okay, within all of it, all the cells, everything, there is no person. Just like on the rope, there is no snake. Yeah, sometimes when you really think about it, it's very jarring. Very jarring. So His Holiness continues, also there is not even the slightest something that is a different entity from body and mind that is apprehendable as I. Consequently, the I is merely set up by conceptuality. In dependence upon mind and body, it is not established by its own entity. So merely in the same way that that rope was designated snake, the mind and body complex was designated I. That mechanism is exactly the same. So just as there's no snake in the rope, there is no I in the body and mind. Yeah, calling the body-mind complex I is simply done by conceptuality. There's nothing there from its own side. So His Holiness says, suddenly it was as if lightning moved through my chest. I was so awestruck that over the next few weeks, whenever I saw people, they seemed like a magician's illusions, in that they appeared to inherently exist, but I knew that they actually did not. This is when I began to understand that it is truly possible to stop the process of creating destructive emotions by no longer assenting to the way I and other phenomena appear to exist. Every morning I meditate on emptiness, and I recall that experience in order to bring it into the day's activities. Just thinking or saying I, as in I will do such and such, will often trigger that feeling. So most of us, we say, I will do such and such. It triggers the feeling of a concrete I. His Holiness says, I will do such and such. And it triggers the feeling of there's something amorphous that you can't pinpoint here. but I still cannot claim full understanding of emptiness, he says. Okay? So this is really something to think about. I remember when I first heard this example of the snake and the rope, I thought, what a dumb example. You know, everybody knows that there's no snake on the rope. And why are you saying that, the I exists simply by the force of conceptuality when, everybody agrees that there is a person there, with that body and mind? So the analogized object, the analogy and the thing you're trying to show are not exactly equal. So why are they saying that the process of conceptuality is the same? Because one is not a snake and the other is a person. Isn't it? Yeah, that is not a snake and this is a person. So what are you saying that the process of conceptuality is the same? It's a big difference. Yeah. The mind-body can function as a person. The rope can't function as a snake. Why are you saying that one's an analogy for the other? Yeah. From the side of both of them existing, or both of them being imputed or designated by mind, in that way they are exactly the same. Yeah, calling a rope a snake is the same thing as calling this I. That whole process of just conceiving and giving a name. Process is exactly the same. But I is different, isn't it? There's really something in there that's me. They're not really the same process. Yeah, they both depend on conceptuality. They both depend on a name. But there's no snake in the rope, but there is a me in the body and mind. I'm sure of that. Because if there were no me in the body and mind, there would be no me at all. And that you can't even put in the realm of reality. Because me, I, is the center of my whole life. You can't tell me I don't exist. That's the most stupid thing anybody could ever say. Okay? So when we're thinking like that, we're confusing emptiness with total non-existence. And we're also thinking that because it's dependent, it's inherently existent. Yeah. It's dependent, yes, on conceptualization, on body and mind, but there's a real me in there. Yeah. I just haven't found it yet. But I know, I feel that I'm in there. Yeah, don't you feel like you're in there? Don't you feel like you exist? Somebody's saying that you exist simply because somebody gave you the name? What kind of rubbish is that, our mind says. There's really something that's me. Well, if there's really something that's me, find it. Identify what it is that's really you. Draw a line on it. Bring it Monday morning for show and tell. And tell us what it is. Tell us who you really are. Okay, the meaning of being set up by conceptuality. In the beginning, pretty flowers or a wonderful house appear to exist in and of themselves, across from consciousness. So consciousness is here, the pretty house, the flowers are out there. But in the end, nothing over there is capable of confirming such an existence. Rather, the mind's perception is their source. Yeah, so it's only by the mind putting data together, conceiving it, giving it a name, that those things come into existence. This is the case for all phenomena. When sought, they cannot be found to exist in their own right, despite appearances to the contrary. So despite our feeling that I am here, that doesn't mean that there's a real me here. Okay? Don't believe everything you think. Okay? Don't believe everything you feel. I feel that there's me. Okay, the feeling that there's me exists, but who's that me? Yeah, who's that me? It is by way of their helping and harming, which are dependent on consciousness, that they exist. They never did, never do, nor ever will exist from their own side, in their own right. They exist through the power of the mind, through the power of conventions. Okay? So depending on their function, depending if they help or harm us for a certain purpose, then we give it a name, it functions that way. I was so surprised to learn that, in ancient culture, medicine is actually considered poison. Yeah? It's just a small amount of poison that happens to counteract an illness. Yeah? So it's called medicine because it's just a small amount that counteracts an illness. If you took a large amount of that medicine, it would indeed become poison. And it would kill you. Yeah? Isn't that interesting? The poison and medicine are actually the same thing. They just have different names, different conceptions of what they are, depending upon the amount that is there and how it is used. In one situation, a certain amount of a substance becomes poison. In another situation, it becomes medicine. Yeah. Why do they put on some bottles, do not give to children under 2? Because for children under 2, that substance becomes poison, not medicine. Okay? I remember thinking, wow, what a weird thing, poison and... Because you usually think poison and medicine are totally opposite. They aren't opposite. Okay? But they both exist through the power of the mind, through the power of conventions. They aren't poison or medicine in and of themselves out there. In the passage cited at the beginning of this chapter, Buddha says that the whole world is dependent on conceptual thinking. Similarly, Aryadeva's 400 stanzas on the yogic deeds of bodhisattvas says, since desire and so forth do not exist without conceptuality, who with intelligence would hold that these are real objects and are also conceptual? In other words, since our responding to something with desire or anger, depends on our conceptuality, how we think of that object. Okay? Who with intelligence would say that there are real objects out there that are good or bad, that are independent of conceptuality? Yeah? Who could say that they are conceptual and real at the same time? Yeah. If they're real, then they have no need to be conceptualized and given a name. If they aren't real, then that's required. Otherwise, we don't know what they are. Okay? Chandrakirti's commentary on that stanza indicates that phenomena exist only in the presence of conceptual thought. So Chandrakirti says, those which exist only when conceptuality exists and do not exist when conceptuality does not are without question definitely not established by way of their own nature, like a snake imagined on a coiled rope. Okay, so the snake on the rope is there just through the power of conceptuality. And it's actually wrong conceptuality. Okay, so things exist when there's conceptuality, but not when there's without conceptuality. So then we think, well, does that mean that all I have to do is conceive something and give it a name and then it exists? If it exists by the power of conceptuality, yeah, then can't I, look at this and call it a baseball? Yeah. It's just like imputing snake on rope, imputing eye on aggregates. I impute baseball on a striker. Yeah. So doesn't it now exist by conceptuality? Isn't it now a baseball? What do the pitchers do? Don't they go like this, Yeah. Okay. So just our conceiving and labeling something doesn't make it that thing. Yeah. And then, otherwise you could call anything anything, So just the point is it doesn't function according to our standard definition. Yeah. It is not that thing. Okay. Even if it does function like that thing, it is not that thing. Even I call this a thermos, and it functions like a thermos, it is not a thermos. Yeah, it is designated a thermos. Okay. But see, we forget that we designated it, so we say it is one, as if it had thermos nature from its own side. Okay. So we have a few minutes for questions.
This is going to start off with a comment. I would like to designate you the President of the United States.
Oh, I decline. Sorry. If I become president, then you have to become, what do you want? You're my friend, so you got to either be, yeah. Yeah, vice president or maybe Secretary of State, Secretary of Justice. Yeah, we'll call you American. You're no longer Canadian.
Okay, we'll go on to the question then. So this is from Transforming Adversity, and this is a question I've had for a long time.
Mhm.
And you and Cancer Jambatek say this: self-grasping ignorance is the root of cyclic existence, and it produces self-centeredness. It is behind self-centeredness.
Yeah, it doesn't act, it's behind self-centeredness, but it doesn't produce it because as I explained before, you can have, it's an error how that's written.
Oh.
Yeah, you can be free of self-grasping and still have that subtle kind of self-centeredness. Okay. Yet sometimes I remember many years ago you pointed out something in the Guru Puja where it says self-centeredness is the cause of all misery. Yeah. And she said, but wait a minute, I thought self-grasping was the cause of all misery in samsara. It is. But when they sometimes write these things, then they say things in a different kind of way. Yeah.
The way I was taught Wheel of Sharp Weapons, it's all about self-cherishing as the root of...
You should cherish yourself.
Well, it's true, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a valid state of mind. But it just gets in the way of achieving enlightenment.
No. Self-cherishing is good. Self-centeredness gets in the way.
Wait.
Yeah. We should cherish ourselves.
Yes.
We're valuable. But self-centeredness is counterproductive.
Well, now you're just talking about translation terms.
Yes, but translation terms can mean a lot.
But even self-centered thought is a valid state of mind. The Buddha said you are your own liberator. You know, we do have to achieve our own liberation ourselves.
Yeah, but I don't think that fits the definition of self-centeredness.
Self-centered thought is seeing one's own happiness as more important than others, right?
Yeah.
But our happiness is more important than others.
No, it's not.
Well,
no, it's not.
This is one way I've heard it described.
I disagree. Our happiness is not more important than anybody else's.
Well, from the point of view, as the Buddha said, that we have to achieve our own liberation.
Yeah.
No one can do it for us.
Yeah,
so
that's
then
true.
Our happiness is more important than others. No one can do it for us.
Let's just stop. I disagree. Yeah, we're talking about two different things. Yeah.
I feel my whole life I've been taught that things exist in their own sense.
Yeah.
Is that right? That I've been taught that?
Yeah, most of us have been taught that. You bet.
Okay.
You bet. Those people are real friends. Those people are real enemies.
Yeah,
this is a real dog biscuit. Huh?
I said this is how society has taught me to think.
Yeah.
Okay.
Completely. And we just go along with it. Yeah.
I've just been sitting here thinking, I've been lying to myself my entire life. I see snakes everywhere, and really, they're not. And so what I'm left with, though, yet is like, okay, well, I got to learn what a rope looks like. But yeah, I'm really seething. I'm really angry that this is what's going on.
Yeah. I mean, we live in a society based on ignorance. And so people mean well, but, we educate each other incorrectly.
And His Holiness read this passage. It wasn't the first time he read it. I mean, he was 35. He'd already read it.
Oh, yeah, he's read this lots of times.
This snake rope thing is like one of the first things you ever hear, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what strikes me is, in my way of thinking, I'm kind of blasé about it. It's like it's become, like, okay, intellectually I get all this stuff. But for him, this was like a seminal moment.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really curious, do you have any advice or how can I shift my mind?
How can we get it from being blasé to a seminal moment? Just repetition, purification, collection of merit, studying it again and again, repeating it, planting that seed in your mind again and again. I think that's the way you do it. Yeah, because like you said, I'm sure His Holiness started hearing that when he was young. Yeah? But, I mean, we've all had that experience, haven't we? Something that we've heard, if you've been around Dharma for a while, something you've heard many times, then one time you hear it and you're going, oh my God, what is, huh? You know, it's like you get something that you didn't get before. That really, wow. You know, how did that happen? Through all the times when it didn't happen. You only get the aha moment through having all the times of thinking about it, processing it, and not having any ahas. But it's that process of building up, purifying, creating merit, planting seeds, and then comes,
So practically speaking, so he's built up those meditative reflections as a progression. Do you kind of go through them even if you haven't had any realizations and just kind of keep going back, or do you really need to stick with identifying the target and holding it before you move on?
Okay. You mean in this particular meditation? I think in this particular meditation, it's good to spend more time on identifying the target, trying to get a feel for what that inherently existent I feels like. Yeah. It's also good to get familiar with the whole argument and the logic and think about that. But in this particular one, this first step is quite important. Yeah, because without any kind of feel for the first step, then the rest just becomes words. Okay? And for us, for a while, it's going to be words. Yeah? So it's going to take a while to actually identify how it is that we grasp phenomena and grasp ourselves.